I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into our family home that Sunday afternoon. The air felt different, heavier somehow. My father sat rigid in his leather armchair, fingers drumming against the armrest. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa, eyes darting to the hallway, then back to her hands. And there was Vanessa, my older sister, leaning against the fireplace with a strange smile playing at her lips. Only my younger brother Brian looked normal, slouched in the corner scrolling through his phone, deliberately avoiding eye contact. "Emma," my father said, my name sounding like a judgment in his mouth. "Sit down." I remember the weight of my portfolio case in my hand, filled with designs I'd been excited to show them, the blueprints for my future that now seemed suddenly irrelevant. I placed it by the door and took the only empty seat, a straight-backed dining chair that had been deliberately placed in the center of the room. Like I was on trial. "We've made a decision," my father continued, his voice carrying the same finality it had when he'd announced staff cuts at his accounting firm. "About the house. The family home, our Victorian in Maplewood that had been in the family for 3 generations. The home where I'd spent weekends in the basement workshop with my grandfather, learning to restore antique furniture while my sister was out with friends. The home I'd assumed would stay in the family, passed down as it always had been." "What about it?" I asked, already feeling a coldness spreading through my chest. That's when Vanessa stepped forward, her smile widening. "Mom and Dad are putting it in my name." The words didn't make sense at first. I looked to my mother, hoping for clarification, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "The entire house?" I managed to ask. My father cleared his throat. "Emma, we've been watching how you both handle responsibility. Vanessa has a stable career in marketing. She's organized. She plans ahead." He gestured toward my sister as if presenting evidence. "You've been drifting. These furniture projects, these designs you keep talking about, it's not stable." "I have a business plan," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I've been building clients. I've been playing with wood in your apartment," Vanessa cut in, "like when you were 12. I felt something crack inside me. 3 years of careful planning, of building my restoration business piece by piece, while working full-time to save capital. 3 years of looking for the right moment to make the leap, and this was how they saw it. "Dad," I tried again, "I've been responsible with every—" "Your sister has shown us the numbers," my father interrupted. His expression softened with what looked like pity. "Your credit score, Emma. The late payments on your student loans last year when you were between jobs. The money you've poured into tools and materials with barely any return." My breath caught. How had Vanessa accessed my financial information? And why was no one questioning that invasion of privacy? "Those numbers don't tell the whole story," I said, hearing the desperation creeping into my voice. "They tell enough," my father replied. "Vanessa will ensure the house stays in good condition and remains in the family. She's agreed to let you continue renting the garden apartment if you need it." "Renting? In my family home? From my sister?" I looked at Brian, hoping for some support, but he just shrugged apologetically before returning to his phone. My mother finally spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "It's for the best, Emma. Vanessa has always had a head for business, like your father. Like my father. Not like my grandfather, who had built his own furniture business from nothing, whose workshop I had inherited both in tools and in spirit." "And what about Grandpa's workshop in the basement?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Vanessa sighed, dramatically. "It's wasted space. I'm converting it to a home gym and entertainment area. You can take whatever tools you want, of course." Of course. How generous. I sat there, trying to process what was happening. The family home, the place, where I had planned to eventually set up my own workshop with its perfect north-facing windows. was being handed to my sister. The sister who had never shown any interest in preserving family history, who had mocked my apprenticeship with our grandfather, who had once suggested selling his handcrafted dining table because it wasn't modern enough. "So that's it?" I finally asked. "You've already decided?" "The papers are being prepared," my father confirmed. "We wanted to tell you in person." "How considerate." "I see." I stood slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "And I suppose my opinion doesn't matter?" "Emma," my mother started, but my father cut her off. "This isn't about opinions. It's about making responsible decisions. For the family legacy." Family legacy. As if Vanessa cared about legacy. I picked up my portfolio case, now heavy as stone. "Then I guess there's nothing left to discuss." As I turned to leave, Vanessa called after me. "Don't be dramatic, Em. Nothing really changes. You can visit any time." Visit my family home. I paused at the door, hand on the knob, and looked back at them. My family. The people who were supposed to know me best. "You have no idea what you've just done." And I walked out, not slamming the door, because I wasn't the emotional, irresponsible daughter they thought I was, but closing it with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than any bang could have. I made it halfway down the street before the tears started. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I drove aimlessly for hours that Sunday, Portland's familiar streets blurring past my windows as my mind raced. Eventually, I found myself at East End Beach, staring out at the water as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the harbor. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts from my mother asking if I was okay, a single message from Brian saying sorry, and nothing from Vanessa or my father. I turned it off and slipped it into my pocket. The beach was nearly empty, just a few walkers and a couple huddled together against the autumn chill. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and walked to the water's edge, letting the gentle lapping of waves against the shore calm my racing thoughts. How had it come to this? Yes, I'd struggled financially after college. Who hadn't? Recession had hit hard, and I'd bounced between unfulfilling jobs while trying to figure out what I really wanted. But for the past 3 years, I'd been building something real. Something that honored my grandfather's legacy while creating my own path. Gilbert Walker had been more than just my grandfather. He'd been my mentor. While Vanessa was busy climbing social ladders and Brian was lost in video games, I'd spent weekends in Grandpa's workshop, learning the difference between oak and maple by smell alone, mastering the art of French polishing, understanding how to breathe new life into forgotten pieces. "You've got the touch, Emma," he'd tell me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You see the story in the wood." When he died 5 years ago, no one questioned that I should inherit his tools. "At least they'll be used," my father had said dismissively, as if they were just objects and not extensions of the man himself. I picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water, watching it bounce 4 times before sinking beneath the surface. The worst part wasn't even losing the house, though that cut deep. It was how easily they'd all dismissed me. How readily. They'd accepted Vanessa's assessment of my character, my abilities, my future. My sister had always been the successful one, the one who checked all the boxes our father valued: prestigious college, corporate job, strategic networking. I'd been the dreamer, the one who saw beauty in broken things, who believed restoration was not just a skill, but a philosophy. And now, according to them, I wasn't even responsible enough to maintain a family home. A memory surfaced, Grandpa showing me the hidden safe behind his portrait in the library. I'd been 16, Vanessa 18. "This stays between us, Emma," he'd said, his voice conspiratorial. Sometimes a person needs to keep certain things protected, even from family, especially from family. I'd never asked what he kept in there, respecting his privacy. After he died, I'd checked once to make sure it was still secure and found it undisturbed. I'd assumed my father knew about it, that whatever was inside had been dealt with along with the rest of Grandpa's estate. Now, I wondered. My phone vibrated, again in my pocket. I reluctantly turned it back on to find 3 missed calls from Nathan. I dialed him back immediately. "Em, are you okay? Brian texted me." Nathan's voice was tight with concern. Nathan Reed had been my best friend since college, the person who'd talked me through every crisis and celebrated every small victory. He was the only one who truly understood what my restoration work meant to me. "They gave the house to Vanessa," I said, the words still not feeling real. "What? The entire house? Can they even do that?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Apparently." He paused, and I could picture him running a hand through his perpetually messy hair, searching for the right words. "That's completely unfair. Do you need a place to stay? I can set up the guest room." The offer nearly broke me. After everything, at least I had this. People who saw me clearly, who understood my worth. "I still have my apartment," I reminded him. "But thanks. I might take you up on the company, though." "Anytime. You know that. Want me to pick up some food and meet you there?" "You shouldn't be alone right now." An hour later, we sat on my tiny balcony overlooking Congress Street, takeout containers from our favorite Thai place spread between us. My apartment above Longfellow Books was small but mine, every inch reflecting my aesthetic. Restored vintage furniture, plants thriving in carefully selected pots, walls adorned with architectural sketches and wood samples. "So what's your next?" "Move?" Nathan asked, breaking apart his spring roll. "I don't know," I admitted. "Keep building the business, I guess. Nothing's really changed with that. Except the workshop you were planning to set up in the basement." I winced. "Yeah, except that." Nathan leaned forward. I know you don't want to hear this right now, but maybe it's time to go all in. You've been playing it safe, keeping your day job at the design firm while building your restoration business on the side. Maybe this is the universe telling you to stop hedging your bets." I stared at him. "The universe has a twisted sense of timing, then." "I'm serious. You've been saving for 3 years. You've got clients. Olivia's been trying to get you to partner with her on that studio space in the Harbor District." Olivia Chen, a brilliant furniture designer I'd met at a craft fair 2 years ago. We'd clicked immediately, her modern designs complementing my restoration skills. She'd been trying to convince me to go into business together, her creating new pieces inspired by historical designs, me restoring authentic antiques, both of us offering custom work. "That space is expensive," I protested half-heartedly. "And perfect. Corner unit. Those huge windows right in the middle of where all the high-end shops are opening." Nathan pushed his food away. "Look, I've never told you this because you needed to come to it on your own, but you've outgrown the side hustle phase. Your work is exceptional, Em. The pieces you restored for my parents' anniversary, they get compliments every time someone visits their house." I smiled despite myself. The mahogany secretary desk had been a wreck when I'd found it. Water damaged, missing veneer, brass fittings tarnished beyond recognition. I'd spent 3 months bringing it back to life, carefully matching the marquetry, fabricating replacement, hardware based on period designs. The result had been stunning, even by my standards. "I was planning to go full-time next year," I said quietly, after I had enough saved for a proper workshop setup. "Plans change. Sometimes that's a good thing." I looked out over the darkening street, watching as shop lights came on and evening pedestrians hurried past. "You know what really bothers me? Vanessa doesn't even care about the house. Not really. To her, it's just another asset, another thing to own. She'll probably renovate it beyond recognition, rip out all the original features, paint over the hand-carved moldings. I shook my head. And that workshop. That was Grandpa's sacred space. So make your own sacred space, Nathan urged, something Vanessa can't touch. That night, after Nathan left, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small apartment, every corner, suddenly feeling confining. Around 2 a.m., I pulled out my laptop and opened the email from Olivia about the Harbor District studio space. 174 Wharf Street, 2,400 square feet, north-facing windows, original brick walls, freight elevator, option to purchase after 2-year lease. The price was intimidating, but not impossible, especially split between 2 people. And the description sounded perfect, almost too perfect, like it had been designed specifically for what we wanted to do. On impulse, I opened the business plan I'd been refining for months. I'd calculated everything based on going solo, maintaining my apartment, workshop, and eventually expanding into my grandfather's space in the family home. Those assumptions no longer applied. I started adjusting numbers, recalculating expenses, projecting new revenue streams that would be possible with a proper commercial space. The more I worked, the clearer the picture became. This could actually be better than my original plan. A clean break, a fresh start, a statement. By dawn, I had a completely revised business plan, a new projected timeline, and a strange sense of clarity that had been missing for months. I sent it all to Olivia with a simple message: "I'm in if you are. Let's make this happen." Her response came less than an hour later, despite the early hour. Finally. "Meet me at the space at 10. I'll bring coffee and the paperwork." I dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that projected confidence. I didn't entirely feel. Dark jeans, a crisp white button-down, my grandfather's vintage watch, and the soft leather boots he'd given me for my 25th birthday. "Good boots take you good places," he'd told me with a wink. The Harbor District was transforming from Portland's industrial past into its artistic future. Old warehouses converted to galleries, former fish processing plants now housing craft breweries and artisanal workshops. 174 Wharf Street stood at the corner of the main thoroughfare, its red brick exterior weathered but dignified, large windows reflecting the morning light. Olivia was already waiting outside, 2 coffee cups in hand, practically bouncing with excitement. At 29, she had the energy of someone who had always known exactly what she wanted and pursued it relentlessly. Her modern designs were gaining recognition in New England design circles, featured in regional magazines and sought after by young professionals furnishing their first real homes. "You're really doing this?" she asked as I approached, handing me a coffee. "Not going to change your mind?" "I'm really doing this," I confirmed, surprising myself with how certain I felt. "Life threw me a curveball yesterday, so I'm throwing one back." She grinned. "I want details over lunch, but first," she pulled a key from her pocket with a flourish. "Let's see our new kingdom." The space exceeded even the photographs. Soaring 16-foot ceilings with exposed beams, polished concrete floors bearing the marks of a century of industrial use, walls of original brick accented by massive windows that bathed everything in northern light, perfect for evaluating wood tones and finishes without distortion. "The freight elevator works," Olivia explained, leading me through the space. "And it opens to the alley where trucks can pull right up. There's a loading dock, too. Previous tenant was an art dealer who stored large sculptures here." "It's perfect," I breathed, already envisioning the layout. Restoration area near the windows, design studio in the corner with its own lighting setup, client meeting space in the front, shared workshop in the middle. "The best part," Olivia continued, "is this." She opened a door revealing a small but functional apartment, included in the lease, perfect for late nights or emergency housing. I turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "How did you know I'd need emergency housing?" I didn't, she admitted, but I figured it would be useful either way. Plus, it helped me justify the price to myself while waiting for you to come to your senses. Over lunch at a nearby cafe, I told her everything. The family meeting, Vanessa's manipulation, my parents' dismissal of my business, the loss of my grandfather's workshop. That's cold, Olivia said, shaking her head. Family should support each other, not tear each other down. Vanessa's always been like this, I explained. She doesn't create anything herself, so she takes credit for or control over what others build. She did it when we were kids with school projects, and she's doing it now with the house. And your parents just believe her over you? I stirred my soup absently. My father and Vanessa are cut from the same cloth. They see value in titles, in appearances, in traditional success. My mother follows my father's lead, and Brian. I shrugged. Brian stays out of it. Well, their loss is my gain, Olivia declared. I've been wanting to partner with you for ages. Your restoration skills combined with my design approach, we're going to be unstoppable. Her confidence was infectious. By the time we finished lunch and signed the preliminary paperwork with the leasing agent, I felt something I hadn't expected. To feel today, excitement, genuine, bubbling excitement. We spent the afternoon measuring the space, creating rough layout sketches, and listing everything we'd need to transform it into a working studio. My mind kept returning to my grandfather's tools, still in the basement workshop of the house that would soon be Vanessa's. I needed to retrieve them before she decided to sell them off, or, worse, discard them as outdated. I should go get my tools from the house, I said as we locked up the space, before it's officially transferred. Olivia nodded. Want backup? I can come with you. I considered it briefly before shaking my head. I need to do this myself. Plus, there's something else I need to check while I'm there. The something else had been growing in my mind all day. The safe behind my grandfather's portrait. If I was making a clean break, I needed to know what was in it. Whatever Grandpa had considered worth hiding, I couldn't leave it for Vanessa to discover and claim as her own. Call me after, Olivia insisted. We'll celebrate our new venture properly. I drove to the family home in Maplewood as the afternoon faded into evening, rehearsing what I would say if anyone was there. The driveway was empty when I arrived. A small mercy. I still had my key, and I used it quickly, half expecting it, not to work, as if the house itself might reject me now. But the lock turned smoothly, and I stepped into the familiar foyer. The house felt different already, as if knowing it would soon belong to Vanessa had changed its very atmosphere. I moved quietly through the first floor toward the library where my grandfather's portrait hung above the ornate fireplace. The library had always been my favorite room. Walls lined with books collected over generations, the scent of leather bindings and old paper, comfortable chairs arranged for actual reading rather than just appearance. My grandfather had spent hours here, and after his death, it was where I felt closest to him. I closed the door behind me and approached the portrait. It was a formal painting done when he was in his prime, dressed in a suit but with the hint of a mischievous smile that the artist had captured perfectly. I carefully lifted it from the wall, revealing the small safe built into the wall behind it. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed the combination. My birth date, a detail Grandpa had shared with a wink when showing me the safe. Easy for me to remember, he'd said. One of the most important days in my life. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open. Inside was a stack of documents, a small leather pouch, and a leather-bound journal. I removed everything carefully, placing it all in my messenger bag, then closed the safe and rehung the portrait. Next, I headed to the basement workshop. I paused at the top of the stairs, breathing in the familiar scent of wood shavings, varnish, and the faint metallic tang of tools. This place had been my sanctuary, the one corner of the house that felt entirely mine after Grandpa died. The fee. Workbenches stood exactly as I'd left them during my last visit 2 weeks ago. Projects in various stages of completion, tools arranged meticulously, shelves of wood samples and finishes organized by type and use. Soon, Vanessa would destroy all of this to make room for exercise equipment and a big screen TV. I moved methodically, selecting the irreplaceable tools. The hand planes my grandfather had inherited from his father, the set of chisels with handles. He'd carved himself, the marking gauges and calipers that had been custom-made for his hands, but somehow fit mine perfectly too. I packed them reverently into cases, wrapping each one in soft cloths. The larger power tools I reluctantly left behind. They could be replaced, and I couldn't transport them all tonight anyway. I focused on what mattered most, what carried history and connection in their very atoms. As I worked, I felt a strange sense of calmness descend. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. I wasn't losing my connection to my grandfather. I was taking it with me, making it mobile, giving it new purpose. 2 hours later, my car was loaded with the essential tools, and my messenger bag held whatever secrets the safe had contained. I took one last look around the workshop, running my hand along the main workbench where I'd spent countless hours, learning at my grandfather's side. "I'll make you proud," I whispered to the empty room. "I promise." I was halfway up the stairs when I heard the front door open. Vanessa's voice carried down the hallway, along with my father's deeper tones. I froze, weighing my options. I could try to slip out unnoticed, or I could face them directly. The decision was made for me when my father called out, "Is someone there?" His footsteps approached the basement door. I climbed the remaining stairs and stepped into the hallway, chin raised. "It's just me. I came for Grandpa's tools." My father's eyebrows rose. Vanessa appeared behind him, her expression darkening when she saw me. "You didn't think to ask first?" she said, crossing her arms. "Ask permission to take what's already mine?" I countered, keeping my voice level. "The tools were given to me when Grandpa died. Everyone agreed on that." My father cleared his throat awkwardly. "That's true, Vanessa. The tools were always Emma's." She rolled her eyes but didn't dispute. "In whatever. Did you get everything? I want to start renovating next week." The casual way she discussed erasing my grandfather's space made my stomach clench, but I kept my expression neutral. "I got what matters." She smirked, misinterpreting my restraint as defeat. "Good. No hard feelings about yesterday, right? It's just business, Em. You understand? Business. As if family decisions should be made with the cold calculation of profit and loss." "I understand perfectly," I said, moving toward the door. "More than you know." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Emma, your mother was hoping you'd come for dinner this Sunday. She doesn't want this situation to create a rift." A rift. As if the chasm they'd opened between us could be classified as a mere rift. "I'll be busy," I said. "I'm moving into a new workshop space tomorrow. With a business partner." That caught their attention. Vanessa's smirk faltered, and my father's eyebrows rose again. "A workshop space? Where?" he asked. "Harbor District, 174 Wharf Street." I couldn't keep a small note of pride from my voice. "Prime location." "That must be expensive," Vanessa said, her tone suggesting doubt. "It's an investment in my future," I replied, echoing phrases I'd heard my father use countless times. "Sometimes you have to spend money to make money." He nodded almost automatically at the familiar business wisdom, then caught himself. "Well, good luck with that." "I don't need luck," I said, reaching for the door. "I have skill, determination, and a solid business plan. But thanks anyway." I walked out into the night, feeling their eyes on my back but not turning around. Let them wonder. Let them doubt. I had work to do. Back at my apartment, I carefully unloaded the tools, arranging them temporarily along one wall. Tomorrow they would have a new home, a proper workspace worthy of their history and quality. Only then did I finally sit down at my small dining table and empty the contents of my messenger bag. The leather pouch contained jewelry, my grandmother's engagement ring, a modest but elegant diamond in a platinum setting, a pair of pearl earrings, and a man's signet ring bearing the Walker family crest. Beautiful pieces with both monetary and sentimental value, but not life-changing. The documents were another matter entirely. On top was a deed, not to the family home in Maplewood, but to a commercial property at. I double-checked the address, my heart racing. 174 Wharf Street, the very space I had just leased with Olivia. No way, I whispered, scanning the document. According to this, my grandfather had purchased the building 30 years ago, establishing a trust that would transfer ownership to me on my 30th birthday, 3 months from now. Beneath the deed was his will, not the official one that had been executed after his death, but a personal letter addressed to me, dated just 2 weeks before he passed away. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, you've found your way to the safe, either because I showed you or because you're resourceful enough to have discovered it on your own. Either way, I'm proud of you. I've watched you grow into a remarkable young woman with not just skill in your hands, but vision in your heart. You see the beauty in things others discard, the potential in what appears broken. That's a rare gift in this disposable world. I've arranged for you to receive the building at 174 Wharf Street when you turn 30. I bought it years ago, seeing the potential in that neighborhood long before it became fashionable. The upper floors are apartments, currently rented with good tenants. The ground floor I've kept vacant, waiting for you to find your purpose for it. Your father and sister don't understand our passion for working with our hands. They never will. They measure value in different ways. Don't let their metrics become yours. The journal contains everything I've learned about business that they don't teach in schools. How to truly value your work, how to negotiate with integrity, how to build something that lasts longer than a quarterly earnings report. You have everything you need to build something extraordinary, Emma. The tools, the talent, and now the space. The rest is up to you. With love and complete confidence, Grandpa Gil. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He had known, somehow he had known I would need this, that Vanessa would eventually make her move, that my parents would side with her. He had created this safety net for me, this launching pad, this proof that someone in my family had truly seen me. The journal was filled with his neat handwriting, pages of business advice, technical sketches, supplier contacts, a goldmine of knowledge acquired over decades. In the back was an envelope containing account information for a trust, with enough funds to cover the startup costs for a proper workshop. I hadn't lost everything. I'd gained exactly what I needed to move forward on my own terms. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and called Olivia. "You won't believe what just happened," I began, my voice shaking with emotion. The universe just threw me a curveball. Right back. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, Portland's autumn light filtering through my apartment windows as I prepared for the day ahead. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd discovered in my grandfather's safe. I spread the documents across my kitchen table again, still half expecting them to vanish like some cruel dream. But they remained solid and real. The deed to 174 Wharf Street, the trust documents, the journal filled with my grandfather's wisdom, and his letter that seemed to reach across time itself to offer exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed. And I ran my fingers along his familiar handwriting. Even 3 years after his death, I could still hear his voice in my head, that gentle Maine accent with hints of his Boston childhood. The universe conspires to help those who know their own worth, he'd often tell me. At the time, I'd thought it was just one of his folksy sayings. Now I wondered if he'd been preparing me all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Moving truck reserved. Still can't believe this building will be yours. See you at 9. After our call last night where I'd explained everything, Olivia had been ecstatic. We'd spent hours revising our plans, not as tenants now, but as owner and partner. The monthly budget we'd allocated for rent could instead go toward renovations and equipment. Every calculation had shifted in our favor. I showered and dressed, choosing clothes suitable for a day of moving and planning: sturdy jeans, a soft flannel shirt, steel-toed boots. As I gathered my things, my phone rang again. Nathan. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked without preamble when I answered. "Not really," I admitted. "Too much happening." "I still can't believe it," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "Your grandfather owned the building all along. Talk about playing the long game. He always said patience was the secret ingredient in both woodworking and life." I smiled at the memory. Apparently, he meant it. "And Olivia's on board with the new arrangement?" "More than on board. She's already talking about custom built-ins for the space and a joint marketing campaign." I glanced at the clock. "Speaking of which, I should get going. The moving truck will be at the building in an hour. Need an extra pair of hands? I can push some meetings around." Nathan's offer touched me. Despite his busy schedule at the architecture firm where he worked, he was always willing to drop everything when it mattered. It was one of the countless reasons we'd remained close since college. "Actually, yes," I decided. "We could use the help. Plus, I want you to see the space." "I'll meet you there. And Em?" His voice softened. "Your grandfather would be incredibly proud right now." The lump in my throat made it difficult to respond. "I know," I managed finally. "That's what makes this possible." By mid-morning, the moving truck was parked outside 174 Wharf Street, and Olivia, Nathan, and I were transforming the empty space into something that felt like ours. The tools from my grandfather's workshop were carefully arranged on temporary shelving. The rough layout we'd sketched yesterday marked with blue tape on the concrete floor, and our combined collection of reference books stacked on a salvaged library cart Olivia had brought from her previous studio. "This place has incredible bones," Nathan observed, running his hand along the exposed brick wall. As an architect specializing in historic preservation, he had a keen eye for structural integrity beneath surface aesthetics. "These beams are original old-growth timber. You don't see craftsmanship like this anymore." "That's probably why Grandpa bought it," I said, carefully unpacking a set of specialized carving tools. "He always said they don't make buildings like they used to because they don't make wood like they used to." Olivia emerged from the small apartment area, clipboard in hand. "I've listed everything we need for basic functionality, prioritized by necessity." She handed me the list, her excitement evident in her rapid speech. "We need to decide on the workshop layout first, electrical considerations, dust collection, airflow. The restoration area needs different requirements than my design space." I scanned her meticulous notes, grateful for her organizational skills. Where I saw possibilities, Olivia saw logistics, our complementary perspectives already proving valuable. "I might be able to help with the layout," Nathan offered. "The firm I work for specializes in adaptive reuse of historic spaces. I could draw up some proper plans, maybe get you a discount on the permits you'll need." "That would be amazing," I said, looking up from the list. "Are you sure you have time?" He grinned. "For this? Absolutely. This is exactly the kind of project I love, honoring history while creating something new." By afternoon, we'd established a functional, if sparse, workspace. My restoration bench positioned near the north windows for optimal natural light, Olivia's design table arranged in the corner with adjustable lamps, and a small client meeting area near the entrance with comfortable chairs salvaged from my apartment. We'd ordered lunch from a nearby cafe, spreading the food across a makeshift table of plywood on sawhorses. As we ate, I found myself sharing stories about my grandfather that I hadn't recalled in years. How he'd taught me to identify wood, species by smell alone, his insistence on hand-cutting dovetails even when power tools would be faster, the way he'd run his hands over a piece of furniture like he was reading Braille, detecting flaws invisible to the eye. "He sounds like he was an amazing craftsman," Olivia said, captivated by the stories. "He was more than that," I replied, the memories flooding back with unexpected clarity. "He understood that restoration isn't just about fixing things, it's about preserving stories. Every scratch, every worn edge, every patina tells you something about the people who used that piece, who lived with it, who touched it daily. When you restore something properly, you're not erasing its history, you're extending it." Nathan nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly how I feel about historic buildings. It's not about freezing them in time. It's about giving them new life while honoring what they've been." To Gilbert Walker, Olivia raised her water bottle in an impromptu toast, "for planting seeds that are only now blooming." To Grandpa Gil, I echoed, feeling a warmth that wasn't just gratitude but something deeper, a sense of continuity, of purpose extending beyond my own life. After lunch, while Olivia made calls to utility companies and Nathan sketched layout options, I retreated to the small apartment to finally examine my grandfather's journal in detail. The leather-bound book opened naturally to pages that had been frequently referenced, the spine creased at sections about pricing specialized work and managing client expectations. One passage in particular caught my attention. "Remember that. The true value of your work is not what the market will pay, but what integrity demands. Set your prices based on 3 factors: the quality of your materials, the honesty of your labor, and the uniqueness of your vision. When these align properly, the right clients will find you, and the wrong ones will go elsewhere, which is exactly as it should be." I read it 3 times, recognizing the philosophy that had guided my grandfather's successful business for decades. He had never been the cheapest option, but he had always been the most trusted. His waiting list had stretched months long because people knew his work was worth both the cost and the wait. Another page contained a list of contacts, suppliers, fellow craftspeople, clients who had commissioned multiple pieces. Some names I recognized from my own connections in the restoration world, but others were new to me. I made a note to reach out to them in the coming weeks. The journal also contained technical knowledge, formulas for custom stains and finishes, techniques for addressing specific types of damage, sketches for jigs, and specialized tools he had developed. This was more than just business advice. It was a master craftsman's accumulated wisdom, preserved and passed down. Tucked between the pages near the back, I found several folded newspaper clippings. The first was a small article from 30 years ago announcing the purchase of the Wharf Street building by Gilbert Walker Furniture and Restoration. The accompanying photo showed my grandfather standing proudly in front of the building, much younger than I'd ever known him, but with the same kind eyes and slight smile. The second clipping was more intriguing, an article about the decline of craftsmanship in America, featuring an interview with my grandfather. His quotes were highlighted in faded yellow marker. "We've created a disposable society where nothing is meant to last. But I believe there's a hunger for permanence, for objects with soul and history. My granddaughter understands this instinctively. She has the hands and the heart for this work in ways my own children never did. Sometimes the legacy skips a generation to find the right recipient." The article was dated just months before his death. He had been thinking about me, planning for my future, believing in me publicly when I was still figuring out my own path. The lump returned to my throat, but this time I didn't fight it. I let the tears come, a release of tension and gratitude and determination all mingled together. This journal wasn't just a business guide. It was my grandfather's final gift, a way of continuing our conversations beyond his lifetime. When I emerged from the apartment an hour later, Olivia and Nathan looked up from where they were huddled over his sketches. "You okay?" Nathan asked, noticing my reddened eyes. I nodded, feeling more centered than I had in days. Never better, actually. Just processing. "We've got something to show you," Olivia said, gesturing me over to the large work table, where they had spread out several design concepts. Nathan's been working on layout options. The sketches were beautiful. Detailed floor plans showing how the space could be optimized for our needs, with areas clearly designated for restoration, design, client consultations, and photography. One concept particularly caught my eye. Central workshop surrounded by movable glass partitions, allowing clients to watch the restoration process while keeping dust contained. "This is incredible," I said, tracing the lines with my fingertip. "The transparency of the process becomes part of the appeal." Nathan nodded. "Exactly. People don't just want the finished product anymore. They want the story. They want to see the transformation." "It's perfect for what we discussed in our business plan," Olivia added. "The fusion of restoration and design, traditional techniques and modern aesthetics. Clients can watch Emma bringing history back to life while seeing how my new designs honor those same traditions." As we discussed timelines and budgets for the renovations, my phone buzzed with a text. "Brian, Mom wants to know if you're coming to Sunday dinner. Said to tell you she's making your favorite." My mother's lasagna, her standard peace offering. When family tensions flared, I hesitated, then typed, "Can't. Setting up new workshop. We'll call her later this week." Almost immediately, another text arrived. "Dad told me about your Harbor District place. Sounds expensive. You sure about this?" The doubt was so familiar, so expected, that I almost laughed. Even Brian, who generally stayed neutral in family conflicts, couldn't help questioning my decisions. "Very sure," I replied simply, then put my phone away. "Family?" Nathan guessed, noting my expression. "Brian, apparently Sunday dinner is supposed to make everything okay." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Are you going?" I shook my head. "No time. We have a business to build." I turned back to the plans, pointing to the client area. "What if we incorporated display cases here, museum quality, with proper lighting and climate control? We could showcase before and after examples of restoration work alongside Olivia's complementary designs." The conversation shifted back to our vision for the space, and by the time evening arrived, we had a solid plan for the first month of renovations. Nathan had to leave for a dinner engagement, but promised to have detailed architectural drawings ready by the end of the week. After he left, Olivia and I sat on the floor of what would become our workshop, sharing a bottle of wine and a sense of possibility that made the empty space feel already alive with potential. "I still can't believe your grandfather set all this up," she said, refilling our plastic cups. "It's like something out of a movie." "He always played the long game," I replied, looking around at the space that would soon transform under our hands. In restoration and in life. He used to say that some woods take 100 years to mature, but they're the ones that last for centuries afterward. "Smart man?" She raised her cup. "To the long game." "To the long game," I echoed, the wine warming my chest as I contemplated the months ahead. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. With Nathan's help, we secured the necessary permits for renovations. The trust my grandfather had established provided enough capital to cover the essential modifications: proper electrical for the workshop equipment, improved ventilation systems, the glass partitions for the restoration area, custom lighting throughout. Olivia's connections in the design community brought unexpected opportunities. A local lifestyle magazine wanted to do a feature on our business partnership, the fusion of restoration and contemporary design in a historic waterfront building. The photographer arrived before our renovations were complete, capturing the raw potential of the space and our enthusiasm for what it would become. "This is exactly what the Harbor District needs," the writer said as she interviewed us among the construction. "Businesses that honor Portland's history while creating its Future. The article, published online first with the print edition to follow, generated immediate interest. Emails began arriving from potential clients, people with family heirlooms needing restoration, others seeking custom pieces that referenced historical styles without being slaves to them. Our waiting list started growing before we'd even officially opened. Throughout those weeks, I remained focused on the work, channeling my energy into creating something meaningful rather than dwelling on my family's betrayal. I called my mother, briefly to explain that I was too busy for Sunday dinners, but was doing well with my new business venture. She seemed relieved that I wasn't holding a grudge, though she clearly didn't understand the magnitude of what I was building. "That's nice, dear," she'd said when I tried to explain the concept behind our workshop. "I'm glad you're keeping busy with your hobby." I didn't correct her. The time for seeking their understanding had passed. Vanessa made no attempt to contact me directly, though Brian mentioned offhandedly that she'd started renovations on the family home, beginning with converting the basement workshop into a home gym. The news stung less than I expected. I was too immersed in creating my own space to mourn the loss of the old one. 1 month after discovering my grandfather's legacy, we held a soft opening for Heritage and Horizon. The name Olivia and I had chosen to reflect our dual focus on restoration and forward-thinking design. The space was transformed but still evolving, with areas clearly delineated but plenty of room for growth. We invited friends, colleagues from the design community, and potential clients for an evening of wine, local food, and demonstrations of both restoration techniques and Olivia's design process. I wore a dress my grandmother had made, paired with modern boots, my own personal fusion of heritage and contemporary style. Nathan arrived early, bringing a housewarming gift, a custom sign for the entrance, the business name carved into reclaimed wood from a historic building his firm had recently renovated. "This is perfect," I said, running my fingers over the meticulous lettering. "Where did you find someone to make this on short notice?" He grinned. "I made it myself. Took a woodworking class last year, remember? Nowhere near your skill level, but I figured the sentiment would count for something." The gesture touched me deeply. It's beautiful, and it means more coming from you. As guests began arriving, I found myself naturally falling into the role of host, explaining our vision, demonstrating techniques at my restoration bench, connecting people with similar interests. The space felt alive with conversation and possibility, exactly as I'd imagined during those long nights of planning. Midway through the evening, as I was showing a retired museum curator the French polishing technique I was using on a mahogany table, I looked up to see Brian standing awkwardly near the entrance, looking both out of place and oddly impressed. I excused myself from the conversation and crossed to greet him, genuinely surprised by his appearance. "Brian, I didn't expect to see you here." He shrugged, hands shoved in his pockets. "Thought I should see what all the fuss was about. Mom mentioned you were too busy for family dinners, so..." His voice trailed off as he looked around the space. "This is actually really impressive, Em." The compliment, simple as it was, meant more coming from him than it would have from most others. Brian had never been effusive, but he was honest. If he said it was impressive, he meant it. "Thanks," I said, suddenly feeling a strange mix of pride and vulnerability. "Want the tour?" I guided him through the space, explaining each area's purpose, introducing him to Olivia, showing him examples of our work. He asked surprisingly thoughtful questions about the business model, the renovation process, the types of clients we hope to attract. "So this is really happening," he said finally, as we stood before a display case containing before and after photos of restoration projects alongside material samples. "You're actually doing what Grandpa did, but bigger." "That's the idea," I confirmed, honoring traditional craftsmanship while expanding its relevance for contemporary spaces. He nodded slowly. "Dad doesn't get it. He keeps talking about how you're playing with furniture while Vanessa is building her portfolio." Brian used air quotes around the phrases, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely aligned with our father's assessment. "And what do you think?" I asked, curious about his perspective now that he'd seen the reality of what I was creating. He hesitated, glancing around at the buzzing event, the engaged visitors, the obvious professionalism of the operation. I think Grandpa chose the right person to pass his legacy to." The words hit me with unexpected force. Brian had never been one to take sides in family disputes, preferring to maintain his neutrality as a matter of self-preservation. This wasn't quite taking my side, but it was an acknowledgement that meant more than he probably realized. "That means a lot," I said simply. He shrugged again, uncomfortable with the emotional moment. "Yeah, well, truth is truth." He nodded toward a group of people examining one of Olivia's designs. "You should get back to your guests. I just wanted to see the place." "I'm glad you came," I told him sincerely. "And you're welcome anytime. I mean that." After he left, the evening continued its successful trajectory. By closing time, we had several firm commissions for both restoration work and custom designs, as well as strong connections with local suppliers, potential collaborators, and media contacts. As Olivia and I cleaned up after the last guest departed, she bumped my shoulder companionably. "So that was your brother, huh?" He seemed surprised. "That's putting it mildly," I agreed, collecting empty wine glasses. "I think he expected a hobby shop in someone's garage, not this." I gestured to the professional space around us. "Think he'll tell your parents what he saw?" I considered the question. Probably, but it won't change anything. They'll still see it through their own lens. Dad will focus on the financial risk. Mom will worry about the unconventional career path. And Vanessa will find some way to diminish it. "Their loss," Olivia said firmly. "Because anyone with eyes can see you're building something extraordinary here." The soft opening marked a transition from preparation to action. The following weeks were filled with client meetings, sourcing materials, establishing workflows, and the deeply satisfying process of hands-on work in a space designed specifically for our needs. I fell into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Waking early, often sleeping in the small apartment at the workshop to maximize productive hours, losing myself in the meditative focus of restoration. Each piece that came through our doors presented unique challenges and rewards. A set of dining chairs with broken spindles and worn upholstery, a secretary desk with water damage and missing veneer, a rocking cradle passed through 5 generations of a local family, now needing careful attention before welcoming a 6th generation. I approached each project with the reverence my grandfather had taught me, seeing not just wood and fabric, but stories and connections. The transformation process never failed to move me. The moment when an object reclaimed its dignity, when its beauty and purpose were renewed. Olivia's work complemented mine perfectly. Where I preserved history, she created future heirlooms, pieces designed with contemporary aesthetics, but built with traditional joinery and solid materials meant to last generations. Our clients began commissioning matched sets, an antique piece restored by me, paired with a modern companion piece designed by Olivia. Our waiting list grew steadily, and we implemented a selective intake process, choosing projects that aligned with our skills and vision, rather than simply accepting everything that came through the door. Quality over quantity, another of my grandfather's principles put into practice. 3 months after discovering the deed in the safe, Business Maine ran a feature on Heritage and Horizon, highlighting our unique approach and the early success of our venture. The writer described our workshop as a perfect marriage of past and future, where traditional craftsmanship meets contemporary vision in a space that honors both. The article included photos of me at my restoration bench and Olivia at her design table, as well as several completed projects that showcased our complementary skills. The final paragraph read, In an era of mass production and disposable furnishings, Walker and Chen are proving that quality, craftsmanship, and story still matter, and that Portland's discerning residents are willing to invest in pieces that connect them to both history and future. The morning the article was published, I arrived at the workshop to find a small package leaning against the door. No return address, just my name printed in neat block letters. Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years, my grandfather, and me in his workshop when I was about 12. Both of us focused intently on a dovetail joint he was teaching me to cut. I was standing on a wooden box to reach the workbench, my small hands positioned carefully under his guidance, my expression one of complete concentration. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a note in Brian's handwriting. Found this while helping Mom clean out some boxes. Thought it belonged with you now. I hung the photograph in my restoration area, where I could see it while working. The image served as both affirmation and motivation, a reminder of where I'd started and why this work mattered so deeply to me. Later that day, as I was carefully removing damaged veneer from a Georgian card table, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail while working, but something prompted me to answer. Heritage and Horizon, this is Emma Walker. A pause, then a refined voice with the hint of a Boston accent. Ms. Walker, my name is Elizabeth Carrington. I believe you knew my father, Marcus Jenkins. The name stopped me cold. Marcus Jenkins had been my grandfather's attorney and closest friend. They'd played chess every Thursday for decades, their friendship spanning well beyond professional connections. After my grandfather's death, Mr. Jenkins had handled the estate but retired shortly thereafter. I hadn't seen him in at least 2 years. Yes, of course, I replied, setting down my tools. How is Mr. Jenkins? He passed away last month, she said, her voice gentle but composed. Peacefully, in his sleep. I'm so sorry to hear that, I said sincerely, memories of the kind but formidable attorney flooding back. He'd always brought me butterscotch candies when visiting our home, claiming they were brain food for promising young minds. Thank you. He lived a full life and was ready at the end, but that's not why I'm calling. She paused briefly. My father left specific instructions regarding certain documents in his possession. Documents concerning you and your grandfather. My pulse quickened. What kind of documents? Legal papers primarily, relating to properties and trusts. He asked that I contact you directly rather than going through the standard channels. Another pause. He was quite specific that these matters should be handled with discretion. The careful phrasing suggested something complex. I appreciate you reaching out. Would you like to meet to discuss this? That would be best. I'm actually in Portland this week, clearing out my father's vacation home. Perhaps tomorrow? He suggested we meet at his club, the Harborview on Eastern Promenade. We arranged a time, and after ending the call, I sat motionless at my workbench, mind racing with possibilities. What additional documents could Mr. Jenkins have been holding? And why the emphasis on discretion? Whatever it was, it seemed my grandfather's long game had yet another move to reveal. The Harborview Club stood like a sentinel overlooking Casco Bay, its red brick facade and white columns a testament to old Portland money and tradition. I'd passed by it countless times but had never been inside. My family, despite my father's professional success, had never quite qualified for membership in this particular echelon of local society. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking my work van with its Heritage and Horizon logo among the luxury vehicles that dotted the private lot. After a moment's hesitation, I decided against changing out of my work clothes. The tailored navy pants and crisp white button-down were professional enough, and there was something empowering about meeting in this bastion of old money while dressed for my craft. At the entrance, I gave Elizabeth Carrington's name to the attendant, who nodded respectfully and led me through a hushed lobby decorated with nautical paintings and antique navigation instruments. We passed a room where elderly men bent over chessboards, and another where leather chairs held meticulously groomed patrons reading newspapers, actual paper ones, not digital screens. The club smelled of polish, aged wood, and subtle cologne. I was shown to a private dining room overlooking the water. The view was spectacular. Sailboats dotting the bay, the islands rising green against the blue horizon. A woman stood by the window, her back to me as she gazed out at the vista. She turned as the door closed behind me. Elizabeth Carrington was in her 60s, with silver hair cut in a precise bob and the kind of posture that spoke of finishing schools and ballet lessons. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, reminded me immediately of her father. She wore a simple but obviously expensive gray suit with a single strand of pearls. "Ms. Walker," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. I'm Elizabeth Carrington." "Emma, please," I replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Emma." She gestured to the table set for tea. "Shall we sit? I've taken the liberty of ordering. My father always said this club makes the best scones in New England." As we settled into our chairs, a server appeared silently with a tea service and a tiered stand of small sandwiches and pastries. Elizabeth waited until we were alone again before speaking. "You look very much like your grandfather," she said, studying me over the rim of her teacup. He had that same focused expression, as if he was seeing both the surface of things and what lay beneath. The observation caught me off guard. Most people noted my resemblance to my mother. Few had ever connected me physically to my grandfather. "You knew him well?" "Through my father, primarily. They were friends for over 40 years. She set down her cup. "But we didn't come here to reminisce. My father left very specific instructions regarding certain matters. He took his responsibilities as your grandfather's attorney quite seriously, even after death." From an elegant, leather portfolio beside her chair, she withdrew a sealed envelope and a larger document folder. She placed both on the table between us. "Before we proceed, I should explain something. My father was a deeply ethical man who respected attorney-client privilege absolutely. However, he also believed in justice and fairness above all. Sometimes these principles came into conflict." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "Your grandfather entrusted certain matters to my father's handling, with specific timelines and contingencies. The materials I'm about to share with you were to be delivered under particular circumstances. Circumstances that, according to my father's notes, have now been met." My curiosity was thoroughly piqued. "What circumstances?" Elizabeth picked up a cucumber sandwich but didn't eat it, turning it slightly as if inspecting the craftsmanship. "The transfer of your family home to your sister, combined with your establishment of a business in the Wharf Street property." I stared at her, pulse quickening. "How would your father know about those things?" She smiled slightly. "My father may have retired officially, but he maintained connections with certain bankers, real estate attorneys, business license clerks. Small towns have long memories and loose lips, especially for those who know how to listen." She returned the sandwich to her plate untouched. "Your grandfather anticipated certain family dynamics. He put safeguards in place." My throat felt suddenly dry. I took a sip of tea before asking, "What kind of safeguards?" "The legal kind." Elizabeth slid the folder toward me. "These documents outline additional properties held in trust for you. Properties your sister does not know about. Properties that, in fact, no one in your family is aware of except you as of this moment." I opened the folder with fingers that weren't entirely steady. Inside were deeds and trust documents for 3 properties: a small cottage on Peaks Island, a timber lot in western Maine, and most surprisingly, a commercial building directly adjacent to the family home in Maplewood. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the papers. "The building next to our house is Burnham's Hardware. It's been there forever." Indeed it has. Your grandfather purchased it through a holding company 25 years ago. Burnham's rents, the space, has for decades, and the rent payments have been accumulating in a separate account. Elizabeth nodded toward another document in the folder. That account now contains just over $300,000, earmarked for, and, I quote from your grandfather's instructions, Emma's workshop expansion when the time comes. The room seemed to tilt slightly. $300,000, a property portfolio, more evidence of my grandfather's meticulous planning and profound faith in me. Why keep all this secret? I asked, trying to process the implications. Why not include it in his will? Elizabeth's expression turned grave. That brings us to the sealed envelope. She nudged it toward me. This contains a personal letter from your grandfather, along with certain sensitive information about your family's financial history. My father was instructed to deliver it only if the family home was transferred to your sister under questionable circumstances. Her careful phrasing sent a chill through me. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight, heavier than paper. Alone. I recommend reading it privately, Elizabeth advised. Its contents may be difficult to process in public. I nodded, slipping the envelope into my bag. Was there anything else Mr. Jenkins wanted me to know? Elizabeth hesitated, then reached into her portfolio one final time. This isn't official. It's personal. She handed me a small, worn chess piece, a knight carved from dark wood with remarkable detail. My father and your grandfather played chess every Thursday for 40 years. This was your grandfather's favorite piece. My father kept it after his death as a memento. He thought you might like to have it now. I accepted the chess piece, turning it in my fingers. The wood was smooth from years of handling, the craftsmanship exceptional. Another connection to my grandfather, another thread in the tapestry he'd woven. Thank you, I said, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. This means a great deal. Elizabeth nodded, her professional demeanor softening slightly. They were good men, our fathers, cut from a cloth you don't often find anymore. She gathered her portfolio, signaling our meeting was concluding. The trust documents are yours. To keep, of course. Everything has been properly filed and recorded. The properties are legally yours as of last week, when you turned 30. As we stood to leave, she added, My contact information is in the folder. Should you have questions, after reading your grandfather's letter, please don't hesitate to call. And Emma? Her tone made me look up. My father believed very strongly in what your grandfather was trying to do. He would be pleased to see you succeeding on your own terms. I left the Harborview Club in a daze, the folder clutched against my chest, the weight of the sealed envelope heavy in my bag. Instead of returning immediately to the workshop, I drove to East End Beach and parked facing the water. I needed space and perspective before opening whatever Pandora's box my grandfather had prepared. The sea was calm today, gentle waves lapping at the rocky shore, gulls wheeling overhead. I rolled down the windows, letting the salt air fill the eye. As I carefully opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a letter handwritten on my grandfather's personal stationery, along with several photocopied documents. I unfolded the letter first. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then Marcus has determined that Robert and Vanessa have taken actions I long feared they might. First, let me say how sorry I am. No matter the circumstances, family betrayal cuts deeply. I know this from personal experience, as you're about to learn. What I'm going to tell you now was never meant to burden you, but circumstances have changed. Knowledge, however painful, is power when wielded correctly. The story begins with your great-grandfather, Charles Walker. He built the family furniture, business from nothing, working 18-hour days to establish our reputation for quality and craftsmanship. By the time I joined the company at 16, it was thriving, with contracts throughout New England and a workshop employing 15 skilled craftsmen. I loved the business, the smell of the wood, the precision of joinery. the satisfaction of creating something built to last generations. Your father, however, never shared this passion. From boyhood, Robert was interested only in the financial aspects, profits, expansion, market share. Not the soul of the work, just its monetary value. When I took over from my father, I ran the Yati company according to our established principles: quality materials, fair wages, honest pricing. We were successful, respected, and our pieces now sit in museums and historic homes across the country. Robert graduated with his accounting degree and joined the company, immediately pushing for changes: cheaper materials, faster production, outsourced components. We argued constantly. I wanted to preserve our legacy. He wanted to maximize short-term profits. The breaking point came when I discovered he had secretly negotiated to sell our company name and client list to a mass-market furniture manufacturer in North Carolina. He had forged my signature on preliminary documents. Had the sale gone through, our family legacy would have been reduced to a marketing label slapped on inferior goods. I stopped the sale, but the damage to our relationship was irreparable. Robert left the company, establishing his accounting firm and cutting ties with the family business. I continued building furniture until arthritis forced me to scale back to restoration work only. Here's what you don't know. 5 years before my death, facing declining health and concerned about the future, I made the difficult decision to sell the Walker Furniture name and remaining assets to a consortium of craftspeople, former employees who shared my values. The sale was substantial, providing the capital for the trust that now supports you. Your father never forgave me for stopping his plan to sell the company years earlier. When he learned of my legitimate sale, he was furious, not because I had sold our heritage, but because the proceeds weren't under his control. He demanded his rightful share as my son and heir. I refused. The money wasn't for him. It was for you, the only Walker who truly understood the value of what we had built. You alone had the hands and heart to carry forward the spirit of our craft, even if under a different name. This decision deepened the rift between us. Robert, with Vanessa's eager participation, began monitoring my finances, questioning my competence, even consulting attorneys about having me declared incompetent to manage my affairs. This is why I established the protected trusts with Marcus's help, to ensure that what I had built would reach the hands it was meant for. Now to the most difficult part. The enclosed documents reveal something your father and sister have hidden from you. When your mother inherited the family home from her parents, it came with specific conditions, namely that it must pass equally to all children in the next generation. The legal term is generation skipping transfer with equal distribution requirement. The transfer to Vanessa alone violated these terms. Your father, an accountant who specializes in estate planning, knew this perfectly well. The documents you hold prove that the house legally belongs 1/3 to you, 1/3 to Vanessa, and 1/3 to Brian, regardless of what papers your parents may have signed. You now face a choice, Emma. You could legally contest the transfer, forcing a division of the property or its sale. This would likely fracture the family beyond repair. Or you could hold this knowledge as leverage, to be used only if absolutely necessary. I don't tell you this to encourage family conflict. I tell you because knowledge is protection, and because you deserve to understand the full context of their actions. What you do with this information is entirely your choice. Remember always that true wealth isn't measured in property or money, but in purpose and integrity. You are wealthy beyond measure in the ways that truly matter. With eternal faith in you, Grandpa Gil P.S. The adjacent property purchase was one of my better chess moves. The board is always larger than your opponent realizes. I read the letter twice, emotions churning like the tide against the rocks below, anger at my father's deception, vindication that my grandfather had seen through Vanessa's manipulations years before they culminated in taking the house, sadness at the family fractures that had been present long before I was born. The photocopied documents confirmed everything. The original deed to my grandparents' home with its inheritance stipulations, legal opinions regarding the invalid transfer, even bank records showing how my father had systematically moved family, assets to accounts only he and Vanessa could access. It was a meticulous case, built by a meticulous man who had anticipated betrayal because he had experienced it before. My grandfather hadn't just left me property and money, he'd left me protection and leverage. I set the papers aside and picked up the chess knight from my pocket, running my thumb over its smooth surface. The board is always larger than your opponent realizes. My grandfather had been playing a long game indeed, protecting me even from beyond the grave. The question now was, what move would I make next? I returned to the workshop that afternoon with a strange calm settling over me. The revelations were still processing in my mind, but they had brought clarity rather than confusion. The puzzle, pieces of my family dynamic had shifted into a recognizable pattern, one with a longer history than I'd realized. Olivia looked up from her design table as I entered. How was the mysterious meeting? Illuminating, I replied, setting my bag down. It turns out my grandfather was even more strategic than we thought. I gave her the broad strokes, the additional properties, the trust account, the legal issues with the family home transfer, while keeping the more personal aspects of my grandfather's letter private. So basically, your grandfather was playing three-dimensional chess while your father and sister thought they were playing checkers, Olivia summarized, clearly impressed. That's about the size of it. I picked up a chisel, the familiar tool, grounding me in the present moment. But now I need to decide what to do with this information. What are you thinking? She asked, setting aside her sketches to give me her full attention. I considered the question as I ran my thumb along the chisel's edge, testing its sharpness. I'm thinking I don't want to be defined by reacting to them anymore. I want to build something that stands on its own merits, not as a response to being underestimated. Olivia nodded. I get that. So what's the plan? First, we accelerate our expansion timeline. The adjacent properties to my family home and the workshop here give us options I hadn't considered before. An idea had been forming since reading my grandfather's letter. What if we created something bigger than just a business? A school. Eventually, a place where traditional craftsmanship and modern design intersect, where people can learn restoration techniques alongside contemporary applications? Olivia's eyes widened. A school? That's ambitious. So was starting this business in the first place, I pointed out. And we've already got a waiting list for commissions. People are hungry for what we're doing. True, she acknowledged. And teaching workshops would be an additional revenue stream. More than that, I said, warming to the concept. It's about legacy. My grandfather preserved these skills by passing them to me. What if we could extend that chain, create a new generation of craftspeople who understand both tradition and innovation? Olivia studied me for a moment, then smiled slowly. You know what? I think your grandfather would absolutely love that idea. I think so too. I placed the chisel back in its holder, my decision crystallizing. Let's draft a 5-year plan. The building next to my family home could become a secondary location. Specialized workshops, material storage, maybe even a small gallery. We'd have a presence right in Maplewood, visible to the entire neighborhood. Including, of course, to Vanessa, who would have to witness our success daily. I didn't say this aloud, but from Olivia's knowing smile, I suspected she understood this particular chess move perfectly well. The rest of the afternoon passed in a flurry of planning and excited conversation. We sketched layouts for the Burnham's hardware space, assuming we would eventually take it over when the current lease expired. We researched educational programs in craftsmanship and restoration, identifying gaps we could fill. We calculated how the trust funds could be strategically deployed to maximum effect. By evening, we had the skeleton of a plan that made my original business vision seem modest, by comparison. This wasn't just about restoring furniture anymore. It was about restoring a tradition, an approach to craftsmanship, perhaps even a way of valuing permanence in a disposable world. I stayed late at the workshop that night, working on a particularly challenging piece, a Chippendale secretary desk with extensive water damage and missing veneer. The meditative focus of restoration always helped me process complex emotions, and today had provided plenty to process. As I carefully matched new veneer to the surviving original sections, I thought about my grandfather's letter. The parallels between my father's attempt to sell off the family business and Vanessa's manipulations to secure the family home were striking. Both prioritized possession over preservation, ownership over stewardship. My phone buzzed around 9 p.m. Brian. "Hey," I answered, tucking the phone between ear and shoulder as I continued working. "Just checking in," he said, his voice casual but with an underlying tension. "Haven't heard from you since the opening night. Mom's been asking." "I've been busy," I replied truthfully. "The business is taking off faster than we expected." "Yeah, I saw the article in Business Maine. Pretty impressive, Em." There was genuine admiration in his tone. "Dad saw it too." That caught my attention. "Oh? What did he say?" Brian hesitated. "Nothing directly to me, but I overheard him telling Mom it was surprisingly professional looking. From him, that's practically a standing ovation." I laughed despite myself. High praise indeed. "Vanessa wasn't as impressed," Brian continued. "She said something about how anyone could look good in a magazine article with the right photographer. The comment was so predictably Vanessa that it didn't even sting. How are the renovations going at the house?" "Still in progress. The basement gym is done. Lots of expensive equipment nobody uses. Now she's talking about gutting the library to create an entertainment space." My hand stilled on the veneer. "The library? With Grandpa's bookshelves and fireplace?" "Yeah. She's got some designer who wants to take out the built-ins and put in a wet bar and media center." I closed my eyes briefly, feeling a pang for the beautiful room with its centuries of accumulated knowledge and character. This was exactly what I'd feared. Vanessa erasing history for the sake of contemporary trends. "That seems short-sighted?" I managed, keeping my voice neutral. "I thought so too," Brian agreed, surprising me with his candor. "Those bookshelves were hand-carved. They don't make stuff like that anymore." "We actually do," I thought, but didn't say. That was precisely what Heritage and Horizon was about. Preserving those techniques and applying them to contemporary needs. "Anyway," Brian continued, "the real reason I'm calling is that Dad's birthday dinner is next weekend. Mom really wants you to come. She says it's time to move past the awkwardness." I set down my tools entirely, focusing on the conversation. "Does Dad want me there?" Another hesitation. He didn't say no when Mom suggested it. Resounding enthusiasm, clearly. "And Vanessa?" "Will be Vanessa," Brian replied, which told me everything I needed to know. Look, I'm not saying it won't be awkward, but maybe it's time to at least be in the same room again. Mom's making that beef thing you like. My mother's slow-roasted beef with Yorkshire pudding, another peace offering in food form. The thought made me both wistful and wary. "I'll think about it," I promised. "Things are really busy right now, but I'll let you know." After ending the call, I returned to the secretary desk, but my focus had shifted. The invitation presented a choice: continue avoiding my family or engage from my new position of strength. Neither option felt entirely right. The next morning, I discussed the invitation with Olivia over coffee at our small kitchenette in the workshop. "So, family dinner," she summarized. "With the sister who manipulated your parents into giving her the house and the father who knew the transfer violated legal terms. Sounds delightful." Put that way, it did sound rather unappealing. Brian seems to think it's time to Move past the awkwardness. The awkwardness they created, Olivia pointed out, stirring her coffee vigorously. Look, you don't need my opinion on your family dynamics, but from the outside, it seems like they're the ones who should be making amends, not just inviting you to dinner like nothing happened. She wasn't wrong. Yet something in me was curious about seeing them now. With all I had learned, with the business thriving, with my grandfather's chess pieces in play across a board they couldn't even see. Maybe it's a reconnaissance mission, I mused. See where things stand, gauge how they're reacting to the business success. Just don't let them pull you back into old patterns, Olivia cautioned. You've changed in these past months. They might not recognize or accept the new you. Her warning resonated. I had changed, not just in circumstances, but in confidence and clarity. I no longer needed their approval or understanding. The success of Heritage and Horizon spoke for itself, as did the growing trust account, the property portfolio, and the waiting list of clients eager for our services. I'll go, I decided, but on my terms, and with clear boundaries. The next week was our busiest yet. 2 major restoration projects reached completion stages simultaneously: the Chippendale Secretary and a set of dining chairs for a historical society. Olivia finalized designs for a contemporary dining table inspired by Federal period aesthetics, but reimagined for modern use. A local college inquired about us teaching a weekend workshop on furniture history and identification. The momentum felt validating and slightly overwhelming. We hired our first part-time employee, a recent fine arts graduate with woodworking experience, to help with basic preparation tasks and client communications. By the time my father's birthday dinner arrived, I felt centered in a way I hadn't during our last family encounter. I was no longer the rejected daughter seeking validation. I was a business owner, property holder, and guardian of a craft tradition my grandfather had entrusted to me. I chose my outfit carefully, professional but not corporate, elegant but practical. A charcoal gray dress with subtle structure, paired with low boots that would have met my grandfather's quality standards. His watch on my wrist, my grandmother's small pearl earrings, and in my bag, the chess knight from Mr. Jenkins. Small talismans of the legacy I was carrying forward. Nathan called as I was preparing to leave. Just checking in before the Lions. "Den," he said. "Want me to be on standby for emergency extraction?" I smiled at his protective instinct. "I think I can handle a family dinner, but thanks for the offer." "You're different now, you know," he said, his voice softening. "I don't think they're prepared for who you've become." "That makes 2 of us," I admitted. "I wasn't prepared for this version of myself either." "Well, I like this version," he replied. "She's confident and clear-eyed and building something real." His words warmed me. "Thanks, Nathan. That means a lot. Just remember, you're not there seeking anything from them. You're attending as a courtesy, from a position of strength." With that reminder bolstering me, I drove to the family home, in Maplewood. The neighborhood looked the same as always: mature trees lining the street, well-maintained historic homes, an atmosphere of established prosperity. But I saw it differently now, with the knowledge that my grandfather owned the adjacent commercial property, that my father had violated legal terms in transferring the house, that beneath the respectable surface lay manipulation and deceit. I parked in the driveway behind Brian's practical sedan and Vanessa's luxury SUV. The house looked subtly different. New landscaping in the front yard, a modernized light fixture by the door. Small changes that signaled Vanessa's ownership, her imprint gradually replacing generations of family history. For a moment, I sat, in my car, centering myself. I touched the chess knight in my pocket, drawing strength from its smooth contours and all it represented. Then I gathered the small gift I'd brought for my father, a restored antique fountain pen I'd found at an estate sale, and refurbished myself, and walked to the front door. Brian answered my knock, relief evident on his face. "You made it," he said, stepping back to let me in. Mom's been checking the window every 5 minutes. The house smelled achingly familiar. My mother's cooking, the subtle cedar from the closets, the underlying note of the beeswax polish my grandfather had always insisted on for the woodwork. These scents had once meant home to me. Now they felt like artifacts from another life. "Emma!" My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, her face alight with cautious hope. She moved as if to hug me, then hesitated, settling for an awkward pat on my arm instead. "You look different. Very professional." "Thanks, Mom," I replied, offering the gift bag. "For Dad." "He'll be so pleased you came," she said, accepting the bag. "He's in the living room with Vanessa. Come, everyone's waiting." As I followed her through the familiar hallway, I noticed changes everywhere. New artwork, different furniture arrangements, the subtle transformation of family space into Vanessa's personal showcase. Most jarringly, a wall of family photographs had been rearranged, with pictures of Vanessa now dominating the display. The living room fell silent as I entered. My father sat in his usual armchair, looking older than I remembered, the lines around his mouth deeper. Vanessa perched on the sofa, glass of wine in hand, her expression composed into careful neutrality. "Emma," my father acknowledged, his voice formal. "Brian said you might join us." Not exactly a warm welcome, but I hadn't expected one. "Happy birthday, Dad," I replied evenly. "The gift is from me, something I restored myself." A flicker of curiosity crossed his face as my mother handed him the bag. He removed the leather case and opened it, revealing the pen, a 1940s Parker Vacuumatic in shimmering green pearl celluloid, its gold nib gleaming in the light. "This is," he began, examining it with genuine interest. "This is actually quite nice, professional work." From him, it was high praise indeed. "Emma's business has been featured in Business Maine," Brian offered into the awkward silence that followed. "The article was impressive." My father nodded slightly. "I saw it. The space looks substantial." "It is," I confirmed, taking a seat across from Vanessa. "We've already outgrown certain areas and are planning an expansion." Vanessa's eyebrows rose fractionally. "After just a few months? That seems premature. Our client waiting list is 3 months deep, and we're receiving more inquiries daily," I replied calmly. "The business climate supports expansion." My father studied me with new attention, the accountant in him responding to facts and figures, even when the father in him remained reserved. "What's your burn rate against revenue?" "We're cash flow positive as of last month, with projections indicating sustained growth through Q4, I answered, using the business language he respected. "Our margins on restoration work exceed industry standards by approximately 15%, and our combined restoration design pairings command premium pricing." He blinked, clearly not expecting such a detailed response. "That's impressive for a new venture." "We have excellent financial guidance," I said, thinking of my grandfather's journal and Mr. Jenkins's careful stewardship of the trusts. "And a solid business plan." My mother, sensing the tension, interjected, "Dinner's almost ready. Emma, would you help me in the kitchen?" I followed her, leaving my father visibly recalibrating his assessment of my business acumen, and Vanessa looking slightly disconcerted. In the kitchen, my mother busied herself with last-minute preparations, her movements efficient from decades of practice. "It's good to see you," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've been worried." "No need," I assured her. "I'm doing very well." "Yes, I can see that. You seem different." She glanced at me, then away. "More like your grandfather somehow." The comparison startled me. "In what way?" She considered while stirring the gravy. "Centered, self-contained. He never needed anyone's approval either. There was something wistful in her tone that made me look more closely at her. My mother had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and maintained appearances. I'd never really considered her own relationship with my grandfather or how she might have perceived the tensions between him and my father. "Did you know Grandpa well?" I asked, realizing I'd never really discussed this with her. "Well enough," she replied, her focus still on the cooking. "He was a complicated man, principled, talented, but not always easy. Your father and he were too different to truly understand each other." This seemed like diplomatic understatement, given what I now knew about their business conflicts. "And Vanessa?" I asked. "Did she and Grandpa get along?" My mother's hands stilled momentarily. "Vanessa always felt your grandfather favored you. Perhaps he did. You shared his interests in a way no one else in the family did." There was no accusation in her tone, just a statement of fact. Still, it hinted at deeper currents in the family dynamic than I'd previously recognized. "Mom," I began carefully, "why did you agree to put the house solely in Vanessa's name? You must have known that wasn't what your parents intended when they left it to you." She looked up sharply, color draining from her face. "What do you mean?" "The original deed had specific terms about it passing equally to all three of us," I said, watching her reaction closely. "Didn't it?" My mother's hands trembled slightly as she set down the spoon. "How did you—" She stopped herself, composure, returning with visible effort. "Your father handled all the legal aspects. He said it was simpler this way, with Vanessa being the most settled of you three." "Simpler or more advantageous for Vanessa?" I pressed gently. My mother's eyes darted toward the doorway, checking that we were still alone. "Emma, please. It's your father's birthday. Can we not discuss these things tonight?" I recognized the deflection tactic from countless family disagreements over the years, my mother's go-to response when uncomfortable truths threatened the carefully maintained family facade. "Of course," I conceded, deciding this wasn't the time or place for a full confrontation. "What can I help with?" Relief flooded her features. "Would you take the rolls to the table? Everything else is ready." Dinner proceeded with the strained politeness that characterized so many Walker family gatherings. My father inquired further about the business, his interest clearly piqued by my earlier responses. Vanessa steered the conversation toward her own work whenever possible, emphasizing recent successes with pointed glances in my direction. Brian maintained his usual role as neutral buffer, offering safe topics whenever tensions threatened to rise. Throughout the meal, I found myself observing them all with new clarity. My father, still sharp and commanding, but with a new fragility around the edges that suggested his confidence had taken hits he wouldn't acknowledge. My mother, more anxious than I remembered, her gaze constantly moving between family members, monitoring reactions, adjusting her own responses accordingly. Vanessa, polished and poised but watching me with wary calculation, as if trying to determine whether I posed some threat she hadn't anticipated. And Brian, I realized with surprise, watching me with something like admiration mixed with curiosity. Of all of them, he seemed most interested in who I had become, rather than how I fit into his existing perception. Emma was telling me about her expansion plans, Brian said during dessert, deliberately bringing the focus back to my business. The workshop setup is really impressive, state of the art. It's a significant investment, I acknowledged, but necessary for the quality of work we're committed to producing. And you're financing this how exactly? My father asked, the accountant in him unable to resist the question. I met his gaze directly. Through a combination of operating, revenue, strategic partnerships, and some inheritance funds that recently became available. Inheritance? Vanessa's head tilted. From Grandpa Gil? I thought everything was distributed years ago. Not everything, I replied calmly. Some assets were held in trust until specific conditions were met. My father's expression sharpened. What kind of assets? I took a small bite of cake before answering, the pause deliberate. Property, primarily. It turns out Grandpa was quite the real estate investor. He had remarkable foresight about which areas would develop value over time. The statement hung in the air, laden with implications. My father and Vanessa exchanged a quick glance that confirmed they understood exactly what I was suggesting. There had been assets they didn't know about, assets that had passed directly to me. How interesting, my father said finally, his tone carefully neutral. Your grandfather never mentioned these investments to me. I believe he preferred to keep certain aspects of his financial planning private, I replied. The chess knight seemed to press against my leg through my pocket, a small reminder of the game in play. He was quite strategic in his thinking. Sunday morning arrived with perfect autumn clarity, the kind of crisp New England day that showcases historic neighborhoods at their best. I arrived at the family home early, wanting to center myself before the extraction team and Vanessa were present. The quiet street was lined with trees just beginning to turn gold and crimson, the Victorian houses standing like dignified sentinels of a more gracious era. Brian met me at the curb, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets against the morning. Chill. Didn't expect you quite so early, he commented, falling into step beside me as we walked up the path. Wanted to document the bookshelves before removal, I explained, patting the camera bag slung over my shoulder. Proper restoration requires thorough understanding of original positioning. He nodded, accepting this professional rationale without question. Vanessa's not here yet. She stayed at her condo in town last night. Said she didn't want to deal with the noise and mess. This was convenient. It would allow us to work without her hovering presence. Mom and Dad? Visiting friends? In Kennebunkport for the weekend. Brian unlocked the front door. So it's just us for supervision duty. We entered the familiar foyer, the house quiet around us in a way that felt almost expectant. I paused, taking in details I hadn't noticed during the birthday dinner. New paint in the entryway, different artwork, subtle shifts that made the space feel less like the home I'd grown up in and more like a designer showcase. She's been busy with changes, I observed neutrally. Brian shrugged. You know, Vanessa, nothing's ever quite good enough as is. We moved toward the library, and I felt a pang of nostalgia as we entered the room that had been my grandfather's favorite retreat. The built-in bookshelves lined 3 walls, floor to ceiling, their quarter-sawn oak glowing with the patina that only comes from decades of proper care. Intricate carvings crowned each section, acorns and oak leaves, a motif that echoed throughout, the house's original woodwork. Hard to believe she wants to tear these out, Brian said, running his hand along one shelf. They don't make craftsmanship like this anymore. Actually, they do, I corrected gently. There are still artisans practicing these traditional techniques. Part of our mission at Heritage and Horizon is preserving those skills and teaching them to a new generation. Brian looked at me with fresh interest. You're really serious about all this, aren't you? The business, the teaching, the whole preservation thing. I've never been more serious about anything, I confirmed, beginning to photograph the bookshelves from various angles. It's not just about furniture or buildings, Brian. It's about values. Recognizing that some things deserve to be maintained. Rather than discarded, that craftsmanship and care matter. That the quick and convenient isn't always the best choice. He nodded slowly. Sounds like Grandpa talking. Is that a criticism? I asked, genuinely curious. No, he said after a moment. It's an observation. And maybe a compliment. Grandpa knew what he stood for. That's rare these days. We fell into companionable silence as I continued documenting the bookshelves, capturing details of joinery and carving that would guide the restoration process. The salvage team arrived precisely at 9, 4 specialists in historic architectural elements, who approached the bookshelves with the reverence they deserved. Their team leader, a woman in her 50s with calloused hands and knowing eyes, assessed the craftsmanship with clear appreciation. Quarter-sawn white oak, hand-carved detailing, traditional joinery throughout. These are museum quality, she confirmed, echoing my earlier assessment to Vanessa. We'll treat them accordingly. The extraction process was methodical and careful. Each section was numbered, each joint was photographed before disassembly, each piece was wrapped in protective materials for transport. Brian watched with increasing interest as the morning progressed, asking thoughtful questions about the process and the planned reinstallation. So these will go into the Burnham building? He clarified as the team began loading the carefully packaged sections into their specialized truck. As part of your school? Yes, I confirmed. They'll form the centerpiece of our reference library and teaching space. Historical texts and techniques accessible to students learning traditional craftsmanship. He seemed to search for the right word. Fitting somehow. Keeping them in the neighborhood but giving them new purpose. His framing resonated with me. Exactly. Honoring tradition while creating new meaning. That's the essence of what we're trying to do. We were supervising the loading of the final sections when Vanessa's SUV pulled into the driveway. She emerged looking immaculate as always. Designer. Sunglasses perched on her perfectly highlighted hair, expression carefully neutral as she approached. Making progress, I see, she observed, surveying the now empty library walls. The designer will be pleased. He's already ordered the custom entertainment center that's replacing all this. The dismissive wave toward the carefully packed architectural elements made Brian wince visibly, but I maintained my professional composure. Thank you for accommodating our salvage team, I said. The bookshelves will serve an educational purpose in their new location. Vanessa's gaze sharpened. Yes, about that. I've been meaning to ask. This adjacent property you mentioned. When exactly did you acquire it? I didn't acquire it personally, I clarified. It's been held in a trust established by Grandpa Gil. The timing of its availability for our use was determined by specific conditions he set years ago. Her expression tightened. How convenient that these conditions aligned with our family decisions. Not convenience, foresight, I corrected gently. Grandpa understood family dynamics better than we realized. The salvage team leader approached, clipboard in hand. Ms. Walker, we're all set here. Everything's properly secured for transport. We'll deliver to your workshop tomorrow morning, as arranged. Perfect, thank you, I replied, signing the paperwork she offered. As the truck pulled away, Vanessa surveyed the now empty library. Satisfaction and something like uncertainty mingling in her expression. Well, that's done. The contractors start tomorrow with the wall removal for the open concept plan. It'll be quite a transformation, I acknowledged. There was no point in expressing regret over changes she was clearly committed to making. That's the idea, she said briskly. This place needs updating. It's been stuck in the past for too long. The comment might once have prompted me to defend our family history, to argue for preservation over modernization. But I recognized, now that Vanessa's choices were hers to make, just as mine were mine. We were on different paths, guided by different values. I should get going, I said instead. Thank you again for the bookshelves. As Brian walked me to my car, he hesitated, then asked, Would you give me a tour sometime? Of your workshop and this school you're planning? The request surprised and pleased me. I'd like that. You're welcome anytime. I might take you up on it, he said, showing more interest than he had in years. What you're doing sounds meaningful. We said our goodbyes, and as I drove away from the family home, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The house, that had once represented belonging, then loss, now simply existed as part of a larger landscape, connected to but not defining my path forward. The next morning, as the salvage team delivered the carefully dismantled bookshelves to our workshop, Olivia and I walked through the space, discussing restoration plans and installation logistics for their new home in the Burnham building. "These are even more beautiful than I expected," she said, examining the carved details. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary." "They'll be perfect for the reference library section," I agreed. Historical materials housed in historical shelving, AI, living demonstration of the principles we're teaching. Nathan arrived with updated architectural plans for the Burnham renovation, now modified to showcase the bookshelves as a central feature of the educational space. His excitement was palpable as he rolled out the drawings on our conference table. "I've designed the main teaching area to highlight the connection between past and present," he explained, pointing to the integration of traditional elements with modern functionality. "The bookshelves anchor the historical section, but they flow naturally into contemporary design spaces. It tells a story of continuity rather than opposition." The concept perfectly captured what we were trying to achieve, not just preserving the past as a museum piece, but connecting it meaningfully to present needs and future possibilities. As we reviewed the plans, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Still on for lunch tomorrow?" "Absolutely," I replied, looking forward to it. Another message followed immediately. "Your father mentioned wanting to see your workshop sometime. Would that be possible?" The request surprised me, a small but significant shift in his position. Perhaps seeing the bookshelves removed had prompted reflection, or maybe Brian had shared his observations. Whatever the reason, it represented an opening. "He's welcome anytime," I responded. "We're planning an open house for our educational initiative next month. I'll send details." Setting my phone aside, I returned to the planning session with renewed focus. The path forward wasn't about winning family approval or proving my worth to them. It was about building something authentic and meaningful, something that honored tradition while creating new possibilities. Later that week, as I carefully restored a section of the library bookshelves at my workshop bench, I reflected on everything that had transpired since that Sunday when my family had given Vanessa the house. What had initially felt like rejection had catalyzed a journey of discovery, uncovering not just my grandfather's hidden provisions, but my own capabilities and vision. The chess knight sat on my workbench, a reminder of strategic thinking and patient planning. My grandfather had seen possibilities I couldn't yet perceive, had prepared pathways I would only discover when ready to travel them. The hidden safe had contained more than documents and jewelry. It had held the seeds of a future he'd carefully planted for me to cultivate in my own time, my own way. As I fitted a perfectly matched piece of quarter-sawn oak to repair damaged shelving, I felt a deep satisfaction that transcended the technical challenges of restoration. This wasn't just about reclaiming family artifacts or establishing professional credibility. It was about continuous connection, honoring the hands that had crafted these pieces originally while adding my own contribution to their ongoing story. The family home no longer represented what was taken from me. Instead, it was simply one chapter in a much longer narrative. My grandfather had ensured I would have the resources to write the next chapters myself, not in reaction to family dynamics, but in service to values and vision I truly believed in. That, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.